I'd like to welcome everyone to this episode of On the Shoulders of Giants, interviews with Luminaries and Retina. My first guest tonight is none other than Dr. Kirk Packo. So Kirk, retirement, you're fully retired now, is that right?
Fully retired. I'm still teaching. I go down to the university office. I'm earmarked several times a month to be with the residents, and I love teaching. It's my life's blood. So as long as I got a pulse, I'm going to do that. But I've retired from clinical practice, which was a tough thing to do. I mean, it's a cliche, but it's tough to let go of that. You know, if you'd asked me in the fourth grade what I was going to be when I grew up, I was going to be a doctor. And then for a while, I even changed tracks for a little bit, but I cycled back to medicine. And, you know, you spend all of your time of memory on a quest to be a doctor. And then just the concept of letting my medical license expire, and knowing that I've walked into the operating room for my last time already is a tough thing.
How did you know it was the right time?
Well, I can tell you, and I'm happy to share this. Let me tell you the whole sequence behind all this. Almost 4 years ago, I was doing a PVR case, and I started getting abdominal pain. And I told my then fellow, I said, you know, I'm going to cancel the next case. I can go to the emergency room. And long story short is that I thought maybe I had a hot gallbladder, MI, they did a cath, but then they did a CT scan and found I had a liver mass. So I was diagnosed with cholangiocarcinoma.
Oh my gosh.
And a year later, it was metastatic. So here I am over 3 years out. And my tumors are a lot of them, most of them just disappeared and they've stopped thanks God, the wonder of immunotherapy. Mm-hmm. So everything is stalled. And I asked my oncologist, well, how much longer do I have? And, you know, to me, metastatic when I was in medical school, and even through practice was synonymous with the end of the line. Mm-hmm. And, but now he says, you know, you may have years to go. And it's already been 3, which by itself is miraculous. So that, you know, you plan for the worst, but hope for the best is the cliche. Immunotherapy, despite the wonderment of it, was a little tough. I mean, I had a complication a couple months into it where I had a branch artery occlusion in my right eye, which is a way to get the attention of a retinal specialist. Thank God it was a supraonasal scotoma, not involving the macula. So it was the best place to have it. And I have no awareness of it at all. And I think I can map it out a little bit on a visual field still. But thank God it didn't impair me at all. So I continued to practice just fine with that. But this last time, 6 months ago, I had a cascade of problems where I had COVID, was hospitalized with that. I was really fatigued. And then the fatigue kept getting worse rather than better. And then they felt it was my aortic valve. This all started, John, when I was in high school, and we can actually get into this and cycle back. When I was a senior in high school, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease. And that was just on a routine chest x-ray getting ready for college applications. And the then therapy in the late 60s, early 70s was to radiate the hell out of your chest. And so I had 5,000 rads of radiation. And then for the next 50 years, I've dealt with radiation issues, coronary artery disease, hypothyroidism, bundle branch blocks that ultimately ended up with the need for a pacemaker and all these things. And the cholangiocarcinoma was a direct result of this too, because it hit the left lobe of my liver. And it's well documented 50 years later, after treatment for Hodgkin's disease, you can get cholangiocarcinoma. But they thought I was having more trouble with my aortic stenosis, another radiation effect. And so I had a TAVR procedure, had a new aortic valve put in. This was about 4 months ago. And then I was supposed to have this surge of energy, which didn't happen. And I kept getting weaker and weaker and weaker. And then what happened was that the immunotherapy took out my pituitary gland. And I lost all my hormones, including ACTH. So I basically had a cortisol level of 0. People don't have cortisol levels of 0. They usually have something.
Yeah.
But I had a cortisol level of 0. And I was doing a case, and I was just, again, these decisions happen in the middle of surgery, which is, for me as a surgeon, it was an interesting sequence. But even my fellow was guiding me through, helping me stand and whatnot. And that night I decided to retire because I felt I just couldn't do it. And I didn't have a diagnosis then. But then after I had some a little bit of prednisone, I felt like $1 million. And today I feel like I'm 20. I've never felt better. I've lost a lot of weight. I feel great. I feel like I could go see 100 patients tomorrow. But I looked at it, John, like God saying, Kirk, you've had a great career. You don't need to do this. I may not give you a recovery again the next time. Why don't you use this to get things together and enjoy things that for the past 50 years I've kind of deprioritized, which is this entity called family. And so I am enjoying to no end my 4 grandchildren. The last one is a 1-year-old baby girl who's the most beautiful little angel on the face of the earth. And so I'm having great fun with her. We're doing the classic downsizing. We're moving to a new home next month. And so that plus the cool thing is I've signed up for, I still have about 5 meetings I'm signed up for to attend. I attended the Stanford 6-hour course on optic nerve drusen a couple weeks ago. Why? Because I love it. And my career goal was to, and we can talk about this too, was to write a paper. I've never written a paper with one of the most influential people in my life, who's Mort Goldberg, was my chairman. So I have a paper that the masthead says Packo and Goldberg. And that was just published a couple weeks ago. And the whole paper was written, submitted, and hit publication after retirement. So I've been more academically productive than I have in a long time too. If retirement means you should do things that you want to do, I'm doing things I want to do. And with the soul thing is, I'd still love to have my hands on a protractor.
Yeah.
But I've had it for several thousand times, so I don't need to do more.
It's funny because how many times have we seen you at a meeting in the last 4 years and just not known this, and yet you bring so much energy and enthusiasm.
Yeah.
The things I think about when I think about you, Kirk, are just passion and enthusiasm, and then a passion for teaching. So where did you get those things? I know your dad was a photographer, and I can understand how that kind of led you into ophthalmology, but how did you get instilled with such just a love of what you do? It had to have started when you were younger. You don't just become this way. You are this way from the beginning.
I think we're the result of not only genetics, but upbringing. And of course, you point to your parents, right? My mother instilled in me a drive to be something different and to be a leader. All of us as doctors, particularly going into ophthalmology, we're smart people, right? Top of the class. And so, being, all A's and all that kind of stuff. But I was class president for 4 years in a row. And I loved being in the role of directing things. And on working with other people in that capacity. And teaching, by and large, kind of grows out of that kind of a pursuit. So I think I've always loved doing that. I really point to the start of this passion in me, and I don't know that my career would have followed the same path without the thing that happened to me, and that was my quest for ophthalmology in the beginning. When I was looking for a residency program, that was the first year of the match. Computers were new. Apple started that year. And people were very skeptical of this thing called a computerized match. It didn't make a lot of sense to us as to how you could trust a computer to decide where you were going to go. And we just didn't get it, that, yeah, it does work out that you're going to match to the highest program that gives you an offer, but we didn't realize that. So I applied to 14 programs, which is a whole lot less than people apply to now. My number one choice was the University of Illinois. I really thought Chicago was a great city. The program was great, and that was the glory days of the eye and ear infirmary in Chicago back then, with some absolute giants in the field who were there. And I anxiously opened up that letter to see what the computer did for me. And you read that first sentence, it says, "We're sorry to inform you that you've received no offers." So I didn't match. And I can tell you a little bit about why. And I learned about why I really blew it on that quest, because I was a great college student. Again, leadership roles in student council, and I was a drama major, which actually was the thing that people found too much out of the box for me, for the people that they're looking for. There was an article that was written about me at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. I was on the cover of the Sunday magazine for these dramatic things that I would do in medical school. And I added that newspaper. I can tell a bit more about that in a moment, but I added that to the applications, and people thought that this was just too weird. So I didn't match anywhere. But I found out within hours of getting that letter from one of the interns who was pushing me to help me get through this disappointment, that the University of Illinois only matched 7 out of their 8 spots. And they still had a spot. And the reason that they had it is they only ranked 8 people. Again, just to show you that people didn't know how to work the match in that first time. So there was an extra spot, and they asked me to come up and interview again. So I flew back up, and I met with several of the faculty again. And I remember sitting in like it was yesterday, I remember sitting in Mort Goldberg's office. And Mort told me what he was looking for in residents. It wasn't good enough for him to train really great eye doctors. That was just a given. What he wanted is he wanted to train people that would actually make a difference in their career. And he called it his ripple effect, where he wanted to train people who contributed and influenced other people, particularly through teaching, publishing, presenting. And those people would then go out and train other people who trained other people who trained other people. Mort told me the story that how he got on that ripple effect is that when he was a medical student, he met with DeBakey, the guy who invented coronary bypass surgery. And DeBakey told the then medical student, Mort Goldberg, that, look at how many people he's influenced, millions, because of the surgery that he invented. Well, I was desperate to get this spot. And there's a great Yiddish term called chutzpah. So I had chutzpah at that moment. I, as a medical student, looked Mort Goldberg in the eye, and I says, "Dr. Goldberg, all I need is the chance. You give me this chance, and I will show you what I can do. And 10 years from now, you and I are going to have dinner. And we're going to decide whether or not I made good on it." And he just pauses and looks at me and smiles, and he says, "Okay." And half hour later, they gave me the spot. And before I caught a cab back to O'Hare on my way back to St. Louis, I sat on the bus station across the street on Taylor Street, and it was starting to snow. It was almost like a scene out of some Spielberg movie, like Tom Hanks was sitting there. But I sat there in the snow watching the infirmary across the street, imagining me walking through those doors in another year and knowing that I had a promise I had to make good on and a dinner that I was going to have to go for 10 years later. And that launched me into, making good on a promise. And I think that, maybe my career would have worked out the same way if I'd have got in, but it drove me. And when I got to the infirmary, I knew I was the guy who didn't match. And I had to make good on it. We did have that dinner. And 2 years ago, when I got that lovely award from the ASRS, Mort called me and he says, "Yeah, you made it. You made good on the promise," is all he said.
You took a break between college and medical school, right? And went out to New York and did some acting and directing.
It was actually in the middle of college, and I was in New York at the American College of Dramatic Arts. Great program. Spencer Tracy graduated from there. A lot of great names. I was thinking of going into it as a field. I was a directing major in college as part of the drama program. And again, it kind of shows you the mind of me. I got to be in a leadership role. And I loved directing. I just absolutely adored it, and did several big productions in college. And when you're in college and summer stock and things that I did, I was a big guy back then. And, so what are the roles? I played character roles. I wasn't the ingenue leading man type of thing. So I had fun roles, but I played the old guy a lot of times. And in reality, unless you're Dustin Hoffman, in real life, they're going to hire a 70-year-old person for a role that's 70 years old. They're not going to hire a 20-year-old kid. And my time in New York really kind of brought me to my senses. The time I spent there was absolutely against my parents' desires. They thought I'd gone crazy. And because they knew I had the abilities to make it as a physician, and they didn't understand. I mean, they let me do the drama gig while I was in college, but they didn't expect me to do it as a career. And I realized that it wasn't for me. And yet, knowledge is a great thing. There's never anything that you learn that you can't value from. And I look at my career and my teaching style, my style at meetings, and I mean, that's my drama background. And so I wouldn't have done it any differently. And even the fact that kept me the first cycle of getting easily into an ophthalmology spot, I wouldn't have done it any differently either. It was a perfect way for me to get my career set out.
Now, your son Bob is a director and works in the film industry. Do you think some of that rubbed off on him?
Absolutely, and more from my brother. I have one brother who just died last year, but my brother is a graphics artist, and my father was a photographer. So I grew up in that type of environment, and my brother was a brilliant graphics artist, and he also made films in commercials and in industrial films and things. And when my son was growing up, my son is now 42 years old, but when he was from 8 to 10, he would spend several weeks visiting with my mother and my brother back in Toledo, Ohio, and they would make a movie. And they would do a parody of a movie that was out at that time. It was Indiana Packo and the Temple of the Dinosaur, small instead of big, things like that. And so he had this collection of wonderful movies that they made with my brother. my son idolized his uncle. And they did it very professionally. They storyboarded it out. They wrote a script. They did scene shots. They did just for a cinematographer. This is the medium shot, the wide shot, and they did the whole thing. So he really got the bug back then. So again, you ask me when I was his age what I was going to be. I was going to be a doctor. You ask my son what he was going to be. He was going to be like his uncle. And in fact, he came home one day with a project that, what are you going to be? And he had a figure that he drew that looked exactly like my brother. And he was going to be an artist and make films. And that's what he's doing. So I live vicariously through my son. So I have a great fun still doing it with watching his career go.
So, your fingerprints, your DNA is all over ASRS, which is just this huge inclusive society. From the naming, you were an advocate behind changing the name from Vitreous Society. What was the importance behind switching that name from Vitreous Society to ASRS?
When I joined the Vitreous Society, I did it because Andy Packer, good friend of mine, was then president, and he saw in me my drive that I'd be a good person to be on the board. So he kind of handpicked me to be on the board and put me on a committee. And when I was there, I could see the things that society had the potential to be. The other societies like the Retina Society and the Macula Society or the AOS, they were restricted, and you had to prove your worth in order to get into them through publications and be voted in. And the founders, Jerry Bavino, Alan Verne, and Roy Levitt, were brilliant in the fact that they made it an open society. And it really stands out among all subspecialty societies in ophthalmology in that way, to this day. So if you've done a fellowship and your life is about retina, you're welcomed. And you could get up and present, and even if it's a crazy idea, you were welcomed. And I thought that was brilliant. And I had thoughts of doing so much more than just the meeting. The website was just starting. I thought there was all sorts of things you could do with it. Create a museum for the history, to create a fellows outlet, to get involved with coding, to get involved with arguing your needs in Washington. Okay. Now the Academy was doing that for us too, but the Academy has a lot on their plate, and we had our own special needs. So I think we needed a society to do it, and it was a natural that the Vitreous Society be there. But the Vitreous Society, when I was on another committee, kind of on my way up, this is right before I was the vice president and then the president, I was on the AMA council, and the Vitreous Society had a seat on the council right with the Academy, and the ASCRS. There were 3 I groups there. And when I introduced myself, everybody laughed because of the Vitreous Society. People were joking in the room, like, well, what, you get an eyelash society too? And I thought there's no way that we're going to be taken seriously in Washington if we didn't have the name Retina in there someplace. And the Vitreous just couldn't be there. Now, the people who founded the Vitreous Society had certainly a lot of emotional ties to it. And I would have been the same way had I been the one who started that society. And some young guy who wants to change everything steps to the plate and says, well, first thing I'm going to do is change the name. I said, what are you talking about? And that path to change the name was not easy. And there was a lot of heavy duty discussions. They were really, really intense things. And the decision to finally put it over the finish line was done by George Williams. I was in my hotel room the night before the board meeting, and I had a whiteboard in my room, and I had a line down the center, and I had yes votes and no votes, and I had all the people named there who I thought how people were going to vote, and it was basically a tie, and there were about 3 people that I didn't know how they were going to vote, but there were other people that for sure I knew they weren't going to vote, and George went down to, and this was about 2 a.m. because everybody was up still. George went down to the founders' suite and brokered some compromises and some other things like trying to pass Bill HR 152, right? So they agreed to put it across the finish line if I kind of relaxed on some other things, which interestingly all kind of changed anyway.
Yeah.
But at that point in history, it changed. And the person who I all through the battle scars that I had with the Vitreous Society, the one person who was always against me, but still had a very, what I felt was a very rational way of thinking, and always in the end spoke up and gave me a chance and said, all right, well, let's let Kirk go with this for a year and maybe it'll work. And let's just see. And that's Jerry Bavino. And Jerry was the voice that ultimately made all those things happen, including the name change. And Jerry is the guy who really started the Vitreous Society with Alan and with Roy. But he was the main driving force, and really was the main driving force that made that happen too. And look what happened. I mean, we're there. We're there in Washington. Look at, I can't help but smile every time I see an email blast from the society and all the amazing things that it does. You know, it's the economies of scale. You know, you can't go out and build an expressway yourself, but you can give some money in your taxes that, together with a few other 100,000 people or 1 million people, that expressway gets made. And the same thing here. You know, people are busy. They don't have the time to do all this. But we've got a great society fighting for us now. And not only do they put on a great meeting and still give that voice for the little person who doesn't really live and breathe publishing, but still wants to call a meeting their own. But they do so much more too, and they're doing more and more. It's thrilling to me to see that.
You know, I think on your watch and under your guidance, the PATS survey was developed. What was the thought process behind why we needed a PATS survey? And did you envision it becoming what it's become?
PATS survey was just kind of brainstorming one day, and there was something somewhat similar that the ASCRS had going on too. It was just as a, but it wasn't something that they planned to do on a yearly basis. And you know, you pick up an idea, you morph it into something else, and you pick the good parts of it, and you add to it, and you evolve, and you come up with a pretty clever thing. And the idea to do trends, to do it every year, and to see how things change over the years, and then to branch it out internationally to see how regionally it changed and whatnot. You know, originally, so many of these things, everything costs money, right? So that was, I had to get that through the board because it wasn't instantly self-sufficient funding, but we were able to get some corporate support for it, and the corporations were interested in the data too. You know, the accurate marketing data is worth its weight in gold, and and I always felt, you know, when that first meeting in Rome happened, and you know, I felt very strongly that we should have an exhibition floor, and the Vitreous Society never had corporate people in their meetings. They took some money in support, but they didn't allow them to put up anything. There was no booths or anything like that. And I felt that we're all the same people. We make a living taking care of eye disease. And we can't do what we do without corporate ophthalmology. But you just need to do it in understanding that you want to be, your ideas be bought off. And the feds got involved with that too. But if you're going to have an instrument in your hand, pretty good if maybe a doctor was involved with the development of that, or if a doctor was the one that brought it to the company and says, this is a need that we have, an unmet need, and let's solve this. And I don't have an electrical engineering background, but you guys have that resource. So let's work together, okay? There's also lots of education that can happen on an exhibit floor. You walk around and you see things, you compare things. I felt we needed to do that. And the PAT survey was just a way to a tool to make that happen or to add to it. And you got to take it for a grain of salt because you're just asking people's idea of what they've done. And, the numbers are in large part inaccurate on things, but it's still, as long as you consider it for what it is, it's still a great resource. And again, it's so thrilling to me personally to see that when it's referenced in a peer-reviewed journal, like reference number 62 is the PAT survey, or you see it presented in a courtroom for liability arguments and things, which is not designed to do, but still people use that. And a lot of the things that I did, again, that was my idea, but I needed a partner in crime, and that's where I turned to John Pollock, and I said, John, let's work on this, and he kind of got the concept pretty quick, and so John and I did it that first year, and pulled all-nighters in this little research office I had in our private room, smoking cigars, 3 a.m, listening to Earth, Wind, and Fire. I can't listen to any Earth, Wind, and Fire song without thinking about the PAT survey. And then we hand brought all these things that we printed ourselves and dry mounted and trucked them all over to Rome and put them up. And it was an instant hit. Everybody loved it. But to see how that's evolved, and my modus operandi is to take something, get an idea, show people what it could be, but then turn it over to someone who hopefully is going to be smarter than me anyway and can add to it. And that's what John did to the PAT survey. I was with the PAT survey with John for about 4 years maybe. And then John ran with it, and then he turned it over to someone else and then made it even better. And the same thing with Retina Times magazine. I did it completely page by page for the first couple issues, and then turned it over to other people who just made it spectacular.
It's such a beautiful publication. We have journals and we have throwaway journals and we have everything. This is like, it's like a book of art. It's so well done and well published. The images are beautiful. What was the nidus behind Retina Times?
Well, I had a lot of things on my plate. This was one of the things I did as president of the society. And I just couldn't do everything. The website was a battle to get in a little bit sharper shape, but we had a newsletter that the society published that was just it was, I think we have some old copies of it that were mimeographed. I don't know if you're old enough to know that purple color to the papers and the smell to the ink. But we had these Xeroxed things were just stapled and it just said the Vitreous Society newsletter. And I hadn't gotten one out for several months because I was just so busy doing other stuff. I mean, basically I had this research office where it started in 1999 and I was accused by one of the board members of being psychotic, which one of the other adjectives that they threw my way, which maybe was not too far from the truth. But I had a bed in my research office, and I was there 24/7 working on stuff. I decided I better get a newsletter out. But then I thought, this is, one of the things on my list that this needed is as a society, we needed our own journal. And I wanted a peer-reviewed journal, okay, which I knew we were going to get later on, which I'm thrilled to see that happened too. But I researched it and realized that getting a peer-reviewed journal is a big process. I thought, well, how about a non-peer-reviewed one? Let's get a start with this. So I started it out, and again, used my background in design with a lot of help from ideas from my brother on how to do it. I learned some softwares on how to do publishing softwares to get it done. So I designed the first 3 issues completely and basically wrote most of the articles. And Brett Foxman, I asked to be the editor with me, and I asked Brett to be the editor-in-chief, thinking that I could hide behind that and people wouldn't recognize that it was me doing this. And when the first issue came out, it was passed around, and it looked nothing like the newsletter that we had before. And Alan Verne, one of the founders, after Brett made the presentation, and I was just quiet, sitting there. The next thing on the agenda was the Retina Times magazine. And this was truly one thing that I didn't present to the board, and I just did. And it's that old cliche, you can ask for forgiveness rather than permission. In this one, I knew if I asked to do it, it wouldn't have got done. And maybe there were several other things that they would accuse I did that way anyway, but this was truly when I'll admit that I didn't ask anybody, I did it secretly. And when Brett was done with his presentation, everybody was kind of quiet. And Alan lifts up the copy of it, and he stands up holding it like this. And he says, "You know what? I'm sorry, Dr. Foxman, but this stinks of Kirk Packo." And I spoke up and I said, "Hey, can you elaborate on that? Do you mean like lilacs? Is that how just exactly what do you mean stinks?" And then it blew up into a big argument based on cost. Now, I had researched it. I went with Karen Baranek, who is one of my loves of my life, and my little sister. And we went to at the exhibition floor at the Academy about 4 or 5 months before I did this. We went to every single retinal company around, and we were selling ads. And I had an ad card, very professional. I had a prospectus printed up on just what it was going to be. We did a mock-up of what the magazine was going to look like. And we got funding. Did we put it over the finish line on the first issue? No, which is again why they wanted to kill me. But and now it's more than self-sufficient. It's a revenue stream as a resource. But it's not designed to be a money maker. That's not why we do it. We do it for the content. But that's the story that kind of behind that. And again, I'm so thrilled to pick up an issue of it each time because it has gotten so much better. And some of the ideas I had of, I had a humor page and cartoons and crossword puzzles and stuff. Yeah, that's cute maybe the first time, but to get some interest off, but that doesn't need to be there. And then the other things that they do, it's another great way to get other people involved in it. The subsection editors and people who stay current. It's great to see that. Again, it's my modus operandi. Get there, if it works and it has some legs to it, then give it to other people and see what they can do with it, because they're going to do it better than what I thought in the first place.
I want to thank you for listening to On the Shoulders of Giants, interviews with luminaries in Retina. This is the end of part 1 of our interview with Dr. Kirk Packo.